The Nakba supposedly lasted 17 years, but the catastrophe still stands. Over 70% of Palestinians have been brutally displaced or some even killed. Palestinians' basic human rights continue to be ignored, and many have lost their way of life, homes, villages, and even lives.
The Nakba started a year after the Arab-Israeli war and continued for 17 years. It was 17 years of violent displacement of 750,000 Palestinians. Zionists did this hoping to establish a Jewish state, but resulted in an ongoing fight for the past 76 years.
On May 15, 1948, the 5 Arab nations, Egypt, Iraq, Jordan, Lebanon, and Syria, invaded Israel because of their disagreement with the UN partition. They also signed an agreement known as the Three Noes Agreement. This agreement stated that Arab states shall not recognize, negotiate, or have peace with Israel. The UN partition hoped to separate Israel into 2 states, Palestinian Arab and Jewish, although their partition was very unequal. After the 5 nations in Palestine rejected the partition, Zionist militias such as the Haganah began brutally killing Palestinians and destroying their homes. Zionists wanted to reestablish their ancient homeland, Israel, and use aggressive force to push Palestinians out.
Despite countless resolutions by the UN, Palestinians' rights continue and still are ignored by Zionists, still hoping to wipe them out using actions they see fit. The UN continued to help Palestinians by making refugees for the 750,000 that fled. 58 refugees, 48 official, 10 unofficial, accumulated throughout the 1950s and are still standing today through the 5 Arab nations.
One reason for Israel being supported by many countries is because they can make much more serious investments with Israel rather than Palestine. Financially, Israel is a better country, but this does not excuse their actions.
Currently, there are 9 countries who recognize Palestine as a country, but ultimately can't do anything given that Israel has over 84 countries on their side. But recently, more and more countries are beginning to speak out for Palestine, trying to support independence. Approximately 22 countries have supported the idea of Palestine becoming an independent state, using East Jerusalem as their capital. This would end brutality by Zionist militia and give many people a place to return to their way of life.
Even though some countries have proposed the idea for a 2-state solution, Israel has repeatedly done things to hinder any chance of a free Palestine. Over time, Israel has continued an illegal occupation of the West Bank, as well as forcefully settling Jewish people on the West Bank. Israel has a policy that any person of Jewish heritage can get citizenship in Israel, as well as their own home in the West Bank. They will send these settlers into their new homes, which are just houses that Palestinians live in, and forcefully remove Palestinian families. Another way Israel hinders Palestinian legitimacy is by jailing many Palestinians on terrorism charges. These charges vary from children throwing rocks at Israeli tanks to even knowing a person who is deemed a terrorist. Since 2021, 5,000 Palestinians have been jailed on political crimes, and since 2000, 12,000 children have been imprisoned by Israel, according to Al Jazeera.
Here's a timeline to show their losses.
The idea for a Jewish state was founded in 1897 by Theodor Herzl, an Austro-Hungarian Jewish journalist. But when Zionism became a legitimate possibility was 1917, when the UK declared their support for an independent Jewish state in Palestine. They also promised Palestine to the Arabs, along with a united Arab state under Arab rule, if Arabs revolted against Ottoman rule. After the end of World War I, the UK made the Mandate of Palestine, with the intention of freeing it in the near future. During this mandate, many Jews from Europe illegally immigrated into Palestine with the help of the UK. Also, Zionist militias regularly did terrorist attacks on civilian centers and British government locations, such as the King David Hotel orchestrated by the Haganah that killed 91 people.
When the UK left Palestine and the UN began to try to partition the land, Zionist militias upped their terrorism by attacking Palestinian villages by massacring their civilians. Approximately 530 Palestinian villages were destroyed, and anywhere from 10 to 70 massacres occurred during the Nakba. 15,000 Palestinians were killed and over 750,000 displaced. After the declaration of the State of Israel in 1947, Palestinians in Israel were under strict curfew, martial law, and subject to travel restrictions, along with other restrictions. Over time, Israel's aggression against surrounding Arab nations only ramped up during this time. An example of this is Israel's so-called preemptive strike on the Arab League in 1967. The evidence for this being a preemptive strike is that Egypt's president ordered his troops to the border of Israel.
Another example is the so-called Suez Crisis in 1956, in which Israel, France, and Britain jointly invaded the Sinai Peninsula in Egypt. They did this because Egypt seized the Suez Canal from the British and French companies. This caused international humiliation for France and Britain and caused British Prime Minister Anthony Eden to resign in disgrace. This also caused the UN to form the United Nations Emergency Force, which was an army used to contain wars that were deemed harmful to world peace. These UNEF troops were deployed in the Sinai until 1967, when Egypt ordered them to leave, and soon after, Israel attacked again during the previously mentioned Six-Day War.
These massacres, the Israeli government's continued mistreatment of Palestinian people, and the USA's heavy support for the State of Israel has led to a growing anti-Western sentiment in Palestine and the surrounding area. Along with this anti-Western sentiment has been a heavy rise in anti-Semitism around the world. While the actions of Israel are unexcusable, it's important to note that Zionism and Judaism are not the same. There are many Jewish people that are against Zionism and the State of Israel altogether. In conclusion, Israel's actions in the Nakba and after heavily disparaged Palestinian culture have led to wider repercussions to even Jewish identity and culture.